Hey everybody, I'm Nick Layton.
And I'm Leah Bottima.
And we're the hosts of Were You Raised by Wolves?
Each week we try to make the world a kinder, nicer place.
Well, that's the idea, at least.
I mean, we try.
Have you ever wondered what to do if you're ghosted?
Or what to do when a friend asks you to borrow money?
Or the proper way to eat Cheetos?
You know, the big questions.
So please find Were You Raised by Wolves wherever you listen.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by the second annual Catskill Cuisine Festival. Visit catskill-cuisine.com to learn more and buy tickets.
Welcome to another episode of Culture and Flavor with your host, Zella Palmer. I am so excited to have this conversation with my dear friend, Klancy Miller, who is the author of For the Culture, Phenomenal Black Women and Femmes in Food, who I was happily part of. And she also wrote Cooking Solo, The Fun of Cooking for Yourself, and is the founder of For the Culture, a magazine celebrating Black women and femmes in food and wine. She is a graduate of Columbia University, where she worked in international development in French Polynesia. She earned her diploma in pastry from Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, and she apprenticed in the pastry kitchen at the Michelin-starred restaurant Taillevent. And she later joined Le Cordon Bleu's recipe development team, working with the Food Network, and she is based in New York, and she has been in many publications such as the New York Times, Vogue, Washington Post, on and on and on and on and on. And she is truly a trailblazer. I'm so proud of the work that she has done over the years. We met at Radical Exchange in New Orleans many years ago, and since then I have been fangirling her and just so honored to have someone like her in our industry that is holding the torch for Black women and femmes in this industry. So welcome, Klancy, welcome.
Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here. Well, we're going to start with your journey because you have such a beautiful journey. And I would love for our listeners to hear just where did you get started? Was it in your mother's kitchen? What informed you? What motivated you to become a pastry chef?
Those are great questions. I do think I kind of got started in my mom's kitchen a little bit. I was more like a taster when she would make things, but I specifically remember making or baking my first dessert in my mom's kitchen. It was a lemon meringue tart. My friend Lee Rankin was sleeping over, and for some reason, I just happened to notice that we had ingredients for a lemon meringue tart, and I thought, why not try to make it? And yeah, so that was my first confection made at home. But I also had my first food job. It was my first job as a teenager. I think I was like 15 or 16. I was a dishwasher in a gourmet food store in our neighborhood. And then I went off I'm just kind of like jumping to the food parts of my story that I think represent the beginning. In college, my first work study job was as a cafeteria worker. I manned the stir fry station at Ween Hall at Columbia, which has gone through various transformations. But when I was there, there was a mini food court, mini food hall. And yeah, I made stir fries for people. Fast forward to graduating or my senior year in college, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. So my goal became figuring things out by trial and error. So I thought, my goal is to figure out what I want to do in my professional life, and I'm going to basically explore whatever I'm interested in. And so I was interested in filmmaking. I took documentary making classes. I took editing classes so I could learn how to edit film. I didn't like it, So I also took acting classes and I took cooking classes, and the cooking classes stuck. I really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed feeling like I could produce something in a relatively short period of time. I was working full-time for an international non-governmental organization, American Friends Service Committee, and I thought I was going to apply what I learned in college in international relations. And I wasn't that stimulated. And I was also frustrated because I couldn't see the results of what we were doing. It seemed like a lot of office work, and I was learning things, but it just wasn't stimulating enough. So on the weekends, I took the classes that I mentioned. And the cooking classes, it's like, oh, wow, you just combine these ingredients and follow a technique, follow a recipe, and you end up with something beautiful. And so that I really loved. And I started looking for restaurant jobs because I thought, okay, I'll become a chef. I applied for a job at Fork Restaurant in Philadelphia, and I didn't get the job, but the chef said, you can work on the weekends doing prep for our brunch service. And that was great for me because I really didn't have restaurant experience. So it was a nice way to get restaurant experience. And that was so fun for me to wake up early on the weekends, go to this restaurant, work all day, help the team. I really was just like chopping onions, cracking eggs. I was doing the most basic of things, truly just prepping ingredients, but I loved it. And I asked the chef if she thought I should go to cooking school because I was considering that. And she said, you don't have to go to culinary school to be a chef, but I would consider it if you're interested in becoming a pastry chef. And that is when a light bulb went off. And I was just like, I'll go become a pastry chef. Like that's what I'll specialize in culinary school. And I had studied in France, in college and in high school. And so I thought, okay, this is an opportunity for me to go back to Paris and combine my love of the French language, my love of Paris, and study food. And so that's what I did. That was the beginning.
Wow. And so after that, what brought you to start For the Culture magazine? Because I have to tell you, when I just thought it was genius. And I was so grateful because I remember having those epiphanies in grad school and just realizing how I didn't know what I was doing or what, genre of, just what to do with these ideas and passion that I had, because it wasn't created yet. Right.
Yeah.
We know that Dr. Jessica Harris, definitely led the way, and Berta Mae Grosner and Edna Lewis, but it was still very new, our industry. And I still feel it that way today. It's still kind of evolving as we go, and we're figuring it out,
Totally.
And then I remember meeting you in New Orleans, and you said, oh, I have this magazine called For the Culture. And I was just like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. I wanted to cry. With being recognized, and just being in space and community where like-minded individuals are doing what you're doing and doing it well. So what was the brainchild, the aha moment that you had when you started the magazine?
So that is kind of a long story that I will try to tell succinctly. The shortest version is I didn't know about that many Black women and femmes in food when I was starting out. I feel like, what were my frames of reference? Strawberry Spoon Bread.
Yep, me too.
Edna Lewis and B. Smith.
B. Smith.
which is great. That's an excellent start.
Absolutely.
But I feel like I was always looking up to, like a Julia Childs or like a Marcus Samuelson is a mentor of mine, and I adore him.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know of that many Black women. Like, I couldn't name peers. I couldn't really, besides the people who I just mentioned, I couldn't name many role models. And fast forward to my working in a couple of restaurants, starting out as a freelance writer, I just felt like, in terms of the media that I was reading, I was never really pointed towards Black women and femmes. Yet, as the years went along, I started meeting more Black women and femmes in food. And at a certain point, I think this was probably around 2016, 2017, I just thought, oh, this would be something good to focus on. And, there's also another key factor. Cherry Bombe magazine, I had written for and become a huge fan of. And Carrie had approached me to do a Black issue of Cherry Bombe. And we had many conversations about it. And I started getting excited about it. And at a certain point, she gave me the green light to start putting together the issue or talking to people, reaching out to potential writers, et cetera. And I got really excited doing that because as a writer, my role has generally been to write. But this was fun for me to kind of seek talent and come up with story ideas and try on the role of editor. And unfortunately, that issue didn't come to light, but I was so excited by the people I was meeting and the ideas that were being given to me that I thought, I want to do this on my own. Like, I want to figure out a way to make this body of work come to life and to have these people share their stories. And a friend of mine, Jeff Gordonier, was like, you should just find the funding and do it. So I was like, okay, that sounds so easy, but also hard. And so I kind of sat with the idea for a while, for a good 2 years, I would say. And then I decided, I could do a crowdfunding campaign. I thought of Whetstone, which I had supported through its crowdfunding phase. And I was like, well, Whetstone raised money this way. I can raise money for the culture this way. And lo and behold, the crowdfunder was a success. So that's kind of the long story of how it came to be. I think looking back, I really wish I would have raised more money, because I essentially raised enough money for the first issue. And so now it's a question of how do you create a sustainable financial base to kind of make this work for a longer term. But that is the beginning part of the story.
And when I think about it, it's clearly, there's always a saying that print is dead, right? But clearly it isn't, because there's definitely a need, because there isn't any Black media. Zero.
Exactly.
Which is crazy that we're in 2024. And when we look back at Ebony and Jet and just these mega, Black companies that told our stories, that I'll never forget my grandmother having that Jet magazine in the bathroom with Emmett Till, and me being a little kid and seeing that. And yet we don't have anything. So are you thinking about bringing the magazine back? I mean, you don't have to, if it's quiet for now and, but are you thinking about, something that you can do past the book? Because we're going to talk about the book in a minute, but I want to see what are your thoughts about printing the magazine again?
Yeah, I definitely want to bring the magazine back. As you know, I recently had an amazing trip to Brazil.
Yes!
And that kind of just it was so inspiring to me. On so many levels. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do an issue dedicated to Brazil.
Yes.
So yeah, I definitely want to bring it back. This is a TMI, but the years 2022 to this year were so jam-packed in my personal life that it was just kind of like, we got to press pause.
Yeah.
Like realistically in terms of, my personal bandwidth. But yes, I do want to bring the magazine back.
I completely understand, because I still don't think we've processed the fact that, you and I, our lives were kind of mirroring each other in some ways. The pandemic, writing a book in the pandemic, as well as both of my parents transitioned, and then your mom passed,
Exactly. Yeah, there was a lot.
So heavy. And I think as Black women and femmes, and even in this industry, and looking at our lives, our ancestors and what they went through, self-care has to be a priority.
Yes, absolutely.
And to pause.
Absolutely. And I have often been a part of team doing the most. And the past couple of years taught me, nope, you have to sometimes jump out of that team and do less.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. So I'm looking at the book right now, For the Culture, which is, the cover. And I remember when you were like interviewing, and just kind of collecting all of our thoughts and, just really raw interviews. And I'm also grateful that you kept many of the interviews, including mine, in a raw form. It was beautiful, because this is how it's okay to have that language of speaking from your womb, And the cover is absolutely gorgeous. And the way that you honored in these beautiful illustrations of Edna Lewis, Leah Chase, Dr. Jessica Harris, B. Smith, who I'm so grateful that I was able also to dine at her restaurant when I was younger, when my parents would go there. And, I'll always remember that swamp thing dish at B. Smith. I'll never forget that dish. And Verda Mae Grosmer, vibration cooking. That changed my life reading that book,
Yes.
Talk to us about the process and just, it's you choosing who you wanted to be in the book, and, just writing the book and formulating so many and working with so many people, because that's a lot to organize.
Oh my gosh. Yes. It was a lot to organize. I'll tell you, the origin story of the book is that it came on the heels of the magazine's first issue coming out. Well, actually it came before that. The first issue of the magazine came out in 2021, but I had been working on it throughout 2020. And as we all know, the summer of 2020, George Floyd was murdered, and Black people temporarily became popular and supported. And my publisher of my first book reached out to me and said they wanted to do a book. And I explained, I'm working on this magazine. The only kind of book I can do right now is basically a version of the magazine celebrating Black women and femmes in food. And so I don't want to say it was easy to come up with, but that's where my mind was. I was thinking of Black women in food and wine, and it was very easy for me to come up with a list of people who I wanted to interview, because I was already thinking of people who I knew I would want to interview in the future. And then I also wanted to honor our culinary matriarchs. And so it was really like the fun part of the book was listening to you, listening to people's stories, learning, asking questions that I wish I could have asked 10 or 15 years ago, you know, in terms of one question I ask frequently is, you know, how do you negotiate, you know, or how do you deal with your finances, or, you know, walk me through that, what that side of your professional life looks like. So I kind of wanted to create a book that I wish I would have had when I was 21 years old and trying to figure out what my path was going to be. That was the whole goal of the book, to recognize that we already hold the blueprint through the legacies that we carry. Thanks to our mothers and grandmothers and our culinary matriarchs who are known and less known. And I just wanted to share that knowledge. So that was the basis of putting the book together and honoring that. And George McKelman, who designed the cover, along with Sarah Madden, who did all the gorgeous portraits, they did such a wonderful job of honoring everyone visually. Yeah, that's really one of the primary goals of the book, is to honor what we hold, you know, this knowledge and expertise.
And this morning I was on Instagram and I was, you know, just scrolling, and I saw a post of Rihanna talking about just how important it is to honor Black women, because we don't get the credit often, you know. And I even think about some of our elders who are still alive, you know, Tony Tipton Martin, so many of those who are here, but who've also passed on, but who didn't get the credit and don't have the access to GoFundMe, who did, you know, didn't have like so many resources that we have now. And so for you to honor them is so profound, you know, because I can, like I said, I can remember, like you know, Martha Stewart was our example, Julia Child, you know. Only through our community did we hear about B. Smith, you know, and then finally she was on television. But even still, that was an anomaly, you know?
Yeah. I feel like especially moving to New York again, I felt like, wow, we're really not being properly acknowledged.
Yeah.
You know, like everyone's getting acknowledged except for us.
Yep.
And so I just wanted, and it was also kind of a lesson for me, like, hey, you don't have to always look outside of yourself or outside of your community. It's okay to. That's okay. I mean, it's great to have role models everywhere, but absolutely recognize the role models who are right here, right here.
Did you find it, I remember when I started writing books, how challenging it was for me to get the Dillard cookbook published. And I can just remember, you know, I had a friend who is well-published, you know, has many cookbooks. I won't mention her name, but she was very helpful, you know, in showing me what a book proposal looked like, and, you know, and audience and all of these things. And when she was trying to help me to shop it around, I just remember getting so, you know, just, oh, well, you know, have you published it? Why don't you publish it at a HBCU? We don't have publishing companies, unfortunately. Well, this is more niche, you know, kind of like the pushing us away from getting those access to those publishing deals. You know, did you run in any of those situations, or have you heard of any of those situations, and any advice for those who want to publish a cookbook?
I must say, I feel pretty lucky that, well, this book came together, the publishing part, with ease. In as much as my publisher for my first book approached me. The first book I wrote, and I feel like I should maybe go back, like rewind, go back in the story a little bit. So when I came out of culinary school, I actually thought I was going to open up a pastry shop, and then I worked in pastry kitchens, and I was like, maybe not. because I found kitchen life really exciting and wonderful and stimulating, but also exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, if I'm in my early 20s and I'm feeling this way, this might not be sustainable for me.
Smart woman.
So I was just like, okay, there has to be another way for me to work in the world of food. And so that's when that was around the time when I got the recipe development job at Le Cordon Bleu. Mm-hmm. And when I left, I lived in Paris for 4 years. And when I came back to the States, my goal was to be a freelance food writer. Or actually, I wanted to work for a food magazine, but I started out freelancing. And I also started out doing a lot of informational interviews with people. And one of the people who I did an informational interview with was Amanda Hesser, who was, I think she was either at the Times or she had just left the New York Times. And she recommended that I speak with a colleague of hers who began her food writing career as a ghostwriter. And I spoke with her colleague, and she turned me on to her literary agent, or at least her first literary agent. And the idea was that I was going to ask this agent, how do I begin as a ghostwriter, or what does that entail? And I met with this woman, and she asked me a few questions, and then she tells me, well, I have a project for you. And it was my first kind of crack at ghostwriting. But in order to take on that project, I had to sign up with this agent for her to be my literary agent. And so it was basically a very simple, unanticipated way for me to get a literary agent. So the ghostwriting thing, it didn't really work out that well, but I had some books that I wanted to pitch to the agent. And so my first idea got roundly rejected by 30 different publishers. But my second idea was cooking solo. And that it turned out to be my first cookbook. And that actually, to come back to answering your question, that, it got a publisher. So it wasn't that hard of a journey. But I definitely, I have heard of the frustrations of getting book deals. I think honestly, this sounds terrible, but it takes time. It took time for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. It does take time. And, I think that it's a learning process because we were literally teaching ourselves, and using the resources that we have and the network that we have to be vulnerable, to say, I need you to show me how to do this. You know?
Exactly. So, which
yeah.
I still ask for. I remember I had another book idea before for the culture. And even though I had written a book proposal, I still asked one of my food friends, I was like, hey, can I see your book proposal? Because maybe I need to get a better template.
Facts. Yes, I get it. But we will be back after a few messages from our advertisers. We're so happy to have Klancy on Culture and Flavor. We'll be back, and where we're going to talk about Brazil more. Yay. We're going to talk about grieving and some of the food that we've been exposed to during that grieving process, and how do we honor our mothers. And then we're going to also come back to baking some of Klancy's favorite recipes. So we'll be back in a few moments. Thank you for joining Culture and Flavor.
Gather your friends and family at the second annual Catskill Cuisine Festival, presented by the Sullivan Catskills Visitors Association, Bethel Woods Center for the Arts, and Resorts World Catskills. Mark your calendars for a flavor-packed weekend from May 10th to May 12th. Experience the fusion of phenomenal food and electrifying entertainment. Rub shoulders with your favorite Food Network personalities, including Andrew Zimmern, Michael Simon, Scott Conant, Marcus Samuelson, Jeffrey Zakarian, Anne Burrell, Melba Wilson, and distinguished international chefs by LaBelle Farms. Kick off the festivities with Friday's star-studded golf tournament and evening reception. Saturday heats up with free tastings, thrilling live demos, music, and family activities, culminating with a gourmet dinner hosted by celebrity chefs. And on Sunday, celebrate Mother's Day with a special celebrity-curated brunch. Tickets for this celebration are selling like hotcakes. Visit catskill-cuisine.com to grab your pass for this unforgettable weekend in the picturesque Catskills. See you there.
We're back. So I lost my mother in May.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And it's been a doozy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's this mother's club that so many women have, you know, and you don't know what it feels like until you lose your mother. And you hear of maybe friends, you know, who've lost their mother. But once you've lost your mother and you know somebody else who's lost their mother, it's deep, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and the material things that they leave behind, you know. It's moments where I feel her spirit, you know, and walking into her kitchen, you know, it just broke me down, like during the funeral. And just looking at this culinary library that she had, she has a bookshelf on the side in the kitchen. Beautiful yellow kitchen. You know, it had tile that we bought in Mexico when we lived there, and she brought it back. And there's the cookbook, and I pulled it out of the library. And you mentioned it earlier, Spoon Bread and Strawberry Wine.
Yes.
And that cookbook was my mother's favorite cookbook. And I remember when she showed it to me, and she was like emotional about it, because they are from Wilson, North Carolina, where her grandfather was from.
Okay.
And fast forward, I end up writing Ed Mitchell's Barbecue, and they're from Wilson, North Carolina. Wow. And then I remember as a kid going through the cookbook and seeing these beautiful Black women just, you know, looking like they were gardening. And I was just like, wow, you know. And I remember reading the recipes because she was so excited about showing it to me that I wanted to learn more, you know, and I wanted to create some of these recipes. And many of those recipes I ate later in life. So sometimes things are planted and you don't eat it until later in life, you know, because the cookbook and just being on the journey of writing Ed Mitchell's story, you know, it didn't taste the same in Chicago as it did in Wilson, North Carolina, or when you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then my mother in her last years was so adamant about us going on family trips to North Carolina to, you know, go back and see and stand where our ancestors stood. And so I find myself cooking more and making recipes that she loved, you know. She loved oysters, fried oysters. Every time she came to New Orleans, she has fried oysters. You know, oysters were her thing, and raw oysters. She loved coffee. Sometimes on my altar, I give her a little bit of coffee in the morning. She loved wine. She's a big wine drinker and jazz lover. And, you know, she loved lumpy collard sandwiches. She loved a good collard sandwich at the powwow. And, you know, she loved gumbo. You know, and she was just a lover of food and wine and conversation and jazz. And, you know, I even find myself like going more to jazz clubs just because that was everything for her, you know. And at first, you know, it was really painful to cook those recipes or, you know, even just talk about it or be in those spaces where I would remember, you know. And I was grateful that the Mitchells let me interview her and include her memory of her grandfather, who was the first Black man to run a hospital, the Veterans Hospital during segregation after World War I at Tuskegee. And she told me about the oyster stew recipe, and which is a classic old school dish in North Carolina, but apparently it's also in other parts as well, in the Carolinas and New Orleans too, because there's definitely oyster gumbo here. But absolutely. I say all of this to say, you know, how how do you deal with grieving? It's because many phases and it never ends, and I saw you post about you going to Paris. Travel really, really, really helped me after my mom died, and being in really warm places where I could break bread with people and they really checked up on me, because sometimes in the US, it's kind of cold. Sometimes people send you flowers and then they mean well. They absolutely mean well. But there was a certain kind of love that I needed. And I had to go to those places to receive that kind of love, that motherly love that I was missing when she left. Just some of the ways that you dealt with grieving the loss of your mother. Was it through cooking? Was it through baking? I saw that you traveled to Paris, and I remember seeing that post and you saying how you really needed that. And I could empathize because I know exactly what you were going through.
Yeah. So, like you said, grieving happens in stages. And, right now it's March and my mom passed on March 16th.
I'm so sorry.
It's International Women's Day today. So 8 days from today is the first year of her not being physically present. Yeah. And in some ways, the grieving has felt new because when she first died, I was in a state of shock and devastated. And fortunately, I was able to take time off from work. I wear a different hat at a university. And, I could just be, I was at my parents' house and I could just, make food for my dad and I. Fortunately, so many people, including you, sent food. That delicious gumbo. Honestly, I feel like we got by thanks to our friends because the last 2 weeks of my mom's life were just gut-wrenching, and I'm going to repeat the word devastating. And so, I feel like the first phase was just shock and disbelief. And I had to put together my dad and I worked on the Celebration of Life service, which was in April. And then miraculously, a friend invited me to a sponsored trip in France, hosted by My Mustard. And I said yes, because why not? But I had no idea. Well, first of all, I actually thought my mom organized this trip. I was like, I see you, Mom. I see you making sure I get to one of my favorite
she
places. Did. I was like, this is what my mom did to help me, or one of the many things. And so that trip, it was unexpected joy. I did not anticipate feeling joy. So I didn't know that would be accessible to me following my mother's death so soon. And that it was also a well-timed trip. Not that I timed it, but my mom did. Because that was in May. And then my book was coming out in September. And so I had to kind of quickly pivot from deep, deep grief to promoting my book. I had hired a PR firm. So like I spent a significant amount of money to help get this book birthed into publications and into the world. And so I feel like I went from the depths of grief into book promotion mode. And then like trying to honor my mom through like going to the movies. My mom loved going to the movies.
Mine too.
Really? Yay.
Yes.
Every time. And it's been pandemic mode. So we've all been, I think, used to binge watching everything.
Yeah.
So it's felt like a significant moment when I actually go to a movie theater, because that's what we used to do.
Likewise.
Like, me and my mom would go see movies as a family. My mom, dad, and I would go see movies. So like doing that, like starting to do that more makes me feel close to my mom. Travel makes me feel close to my mom. I think the grief that I have felt, or the form of it that I have frequently felt, is extreme fatigue.
Yeah. That
just kind of will arrive unannounced, And it's not like, there's zero physical ailment happening, it's just, oh, this is grief fatigue, and it visits me. And I have another friend who lost her mom. She lost her mom about 3 years ago. And she has reminded me, Clancy, you have to honor it. Yeah. You have to honor the grief, period. But when that grief fatigue visits, just pay attention, slow down. So part of my grieving has been slowing down. And then, like, I visit my dad a lot. Yeah. And, I'll pay attention to things that belong to my mom. My mother loved designing homes. She loved decorating homes. So on my most recent visit to Philly, I got one of her design books. Wow. And just sitting, my mom loved a beautiful room. She loved to make a room beautiful. She loved to sit in beautiful rooms. And so looking at this book and looking at these beautiful rooms and realizing, oh, this is how my mom, like, she was brought up in a beautiful home, but she also she taught herself how to make a space sing. And so looking at this book, or looking at other books of hers, that makes me feel close to her. Staring into people's homes, because she liked to be nosy. She liked to check out how people were, decorating their homes from a distance. We used to be so nosy. We would go to open houses. I haven't started doing that yet, but cooking wise, my mother loved pound cakes. Like, she loved pound cakes so much. And so recently I've been making, like, either my spin on pound cakes, or like just straight up pound cakes. And I actually, and thank you for correcting me with the title. It's strawberry wine and spoon bread, right?
It's spoon bread and strawberry wine.
Spoon bread and strawberry wine. Yes. I'm actually reminded that I need to make some spoon bread, because my mother loved.
You have to take a picture of it. I want to see it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. My mom loved spoon bread. And that was a piece of her childhood that she shared with me. So, and my mom had a big sweet tooth. So I think I haven't been doing like brilliant cooking recently, because I think part of my grieving has been a desire to, as I said before, do less. Yeah. But the baking that I've been doing, I think definitely is a wink to my mom. Yeah. Who loved pretty much, well, I'm not going to say all desserts, but she had her favorites, and her favorites are some of my favorites. So it's a special joy to make them.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I for any listeners, it's a process, it's forever, because, your mother is your mother. There's nothing like it. And I feel her spirit.
Yes.
Many times. And I definitely feel that she orchestrated some of the things that happened after she left.
Absolutely.
But she was even orchestrating it while she was passing, because some people lose their loved one or their mother, in an instance. And I don't think they never prepare you for if they are transitioning in front of your eyes, and you have to watch them and take care of, and the care that it takes into doing that. I was on a plane constantly to Chicago, balancing, my children, work, and still trying to, in a healthcare system that even if you have good health insurance, it's just like, oh, here, I'm just going to give you this breath machine, or here's some chucks, figure it out, and if you don't have the resources, if somebody's, transitioning and they can no longer walk, if you don't have the resources, it's very, very difficult, and I don't think we talk about that enough in our healthcare system, about what happens when an elder transitions, because we don't take care of our elders like many other countries, unfortunately. And, those are conversations that I definitely think we should have at some point. But the food has helped me definitely. And when you talked about slowing down, Christmas was really hard for me. And I would see posts, throughout the years of people saying, some people are grieving during the holidays, so be kind to them. And I didn't really understand until it hit me over Christmas, because Christmas was her favorite holiday. I mean, she went all out for Christmas, and just sitting there in that grief and trying to, I didn't even buy a tree, I'll be honest, and I'm still trying to show up for my kids and like be joyful, but it was hard. It was hard on all of us, because Christmas was her, and I know in time, we will have more traditions, and we'll always honor her and my dad, It was, I empathize with anybody who's going through the many processes of life and figuring out ways, how do I honor her? How do I honor my mother? And, and still cook those recipes, because I mean, like I said, that's Spoon Bread and Strawberry Wine book. She was teary-eyed giving it to me and showing it to me, because the love that she had for her grandfather was so deep, and she wanted to make sure that the next generation, knew about those North Carolina recipes that she grew up on,
Yes.
And so eventually I think, we'll all get to that point. If you've lost your mother and recently, you'll get to that point. It's time. But I'm just grateful for joy. And I'm grateful that your mom sent you on a trip. I'm grateful that my mom did, because I needed that, big, when I was able to go to different countries, those big loving hugs that, and more than just a flower or a card. And like I said, I appreciate, and then my community showed up big time for my mother, and for us. And it was amazing. So I don't want to take anything away from that, but it was also refreshing just to get out of that space of being in it, like wallowing in it, and reminders of people who knew her. And then it's just like flashbacks, and you're just like, oh, she's not here. And it's just, it feels different. Like Thanksgiving in New York with my Uncle Wambu's house, they're not here, it feels weird,
Yeah, I totally get it. And specifically, I 1000% get the holiday reference you were talking about. And you're right. You don't know until you go through it. I too had heard, and, my dad is a minister, and a lot of people confide in him. And for years, I mean, probably since I was a kid, he would talk about how the holidays can actually be very hard on many people. And I never got it, ever, except for this year, unfortunately, we were with friends on Thanksgiving, and for Christmas, we went down to see my dad's family in Georgia. But I was just like, well, thank goodness, because it is hard. It's, and you can't comprehend it unless you've experienced the loss of your mom.
Yeah. But on a lighter note, let's talk about Brazil. Now, I was like watching it because I've never been to Rio, but I've been to Sao Paulo as well as Bahia. And I just loved Brazil. I mean, I know I would love to hear your stories, some of your food stories, some of the things that you ate. We recently had Paty Duras, who is coming in an upcoming episode, who is just a dynamic Afro-Brazilian woman from Sao Paulo that is doing incredible work with Afro-Brazilian and indigenous food cultural bearers. And I just want to, she's really opened up a door for me to experience some of the most amazing cuisine. And I, even just being there, I mean, the barbecue scene, at least in Sao Paulo, when I was co-curated the Churrascada Barbecue Festival, and eating in Bahia, the moqueca at Dona Susana's restaurant, and then acarajé. I mean, oh my God. And I want to hear all about Rio. So please do tell.
Rio, woo, is everything. You should see the smile on my face right now. Rio, I've been looking for apartments. I've been looking, how much does it cost to buy? It's cheaper than New York. I'll tell you that much. And it's, oh my God, Rio is everything. I don't know if I told you this, but so when I graduated from college, I moved back to Philly. And in the midst of one of my filmmaking classes, projects, I met this guy who I immediately had a huge crush on, and he was living in Bahia. And I became obsessed with him and Bahia. I was like, I'm going to live in Salvador too. And I started learning Portuguese and playing capoeira and learning about candomblé and reading Jorge Amado novels. And he's a famous Brazilian author for listeners who have never heard of him. And anyway, so I ended up going to Paris instead of Brazil all those years ago. So I wanted to celebrate my birthday in Brazil. And I specifically wanted to go to Rio just because visually, I don't know why it was so on my mind, but that was kind of the visual landscape I wanted for my birthday. So I asked a couple of friends if they wanted to go. One friend was like, yes. And so the other friend wanted to go too, but ended up not being able to come. But long story short, I was like, okay, we're going to stay right on the beach. We were on Ipanema Beach. Literally leave the back door of the hotel and you are on the beach. And I was like, this is what I'm talking about. And it was, 8 days of paradise. I woke up every morning early, had my little breakfast, an acai bowl, watching people walk along the beach. And just, that was very important to me because I really love bodies of water, specifically ocean. I love some beach time. So that was a major part of our trip every single day. And then exploring a few beaches. We hired a wonderful person, Eliabe, to be our translator and guide. And he took us out dancing, and he took us to great places to eat, and he took us to Praia do Leme, which is, I would say, well, Black people are everywhere because Brazil, has a large Black population, but like this one beach felt particularly, it was called the Rasta Beach. And it felt like particularly like, oh, this is all of us right up on the beach. I was just like, this is the best. And like I've never seen a beach scene like what I saw in Rio at the various beaches we went to. Like people are selling empanadas. They're selling fresh coconut water, like from the coconut. They're selling this cool tea, which is like half mate, half passion fruit, or half limonade. people selling hamburgers, grilled
fried cheese.
Exactly. The corn,
I love
bikinis, sunglasses. I was mesmerized. That's all to say. I was in a state of bliss and awe.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a huge highlight that I just loved. And the fact that it's an enormous city. It's like New York City big or Tokyo big. It's a big, big city, but you've got these beautiful beaches.
Yeah.
We also, Eliabe took us to this wonderful restaurant called Yaya.
Mm-hmm.
It might be Yaya Comedia, or like the Portuguese word for kitchen, I think, or food. And it's owned by a Black woman chef. Mm-hmm. And we had acarajé there. We had moqueca. We had shrimp bobo. We had feijoada. We had the best cocktails I think I have ever had.
The caipirinhas.
We had the caipirinhas nonstop, but they had this one cocktail that was like a caipirinha, but it had a clove flavored rum, like clove and cinnamon, and it had passion fruit, and like you stir it up with a burning cinnamon stick, and it was incredible. We went to this wonderful seafood restaurant. We had great food, and because I'm sometimes a weirdo, I was like, let's keep going back to those places because they're delicious. And the restaurant Yaya also had, a gorgeous staff. Some beautiful Black men. And I was like, let's become friends with them.
I love it. Girl, the eye candy, Lord Jesus.
The level of beauty and body positivity. I was not ready.
You are so right about the body positivity. I was like, yo, I'm buying a thong and just let it go. I don't know these people.
Yes. I was so, in all honesty, I think one of the things that maybe kind of kept me from going to Brazil for years was like, oh my gosh, but you have to wear the teeny tiny bikinis, and I don't know if I feel comfortable in the teeny tiny bikinis. And then you go and you see people. I saw grandmothers with heads of silver hair walking with their little grandbabies the grandmas are in bikinis. Yes. And people of every age and every size.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, we outside. And
we outside.
We are going to wear the tiny things. And it's all good. Like, it's beautiful, actually. Like, that is part of the beauty, that people are free and comfortable in their skin and enjoying themselves. So I was like, yes. And thank you. I needed this.
Such a beautiful people culture. I mean, and I remember, saudade, just some of the Brazilian Portuguese particularly, then the way that it's so romantic and the way they draw, their words, it's just the meaning of saudade is basically a feeling or longing, melancholy or nostalgia that is supposedly characteristic of the Portuguese or Brazilian temperament. And when I tell you that is a real thing, and I don't want to, romanticize Brazil, they definitely have challenges and issues, and, speaking to Brazilians, particularly Afro-Brazilians, it is a lot going on there. But the spirit, the spirit is so intense and so beautiful and deep. And I think, when you talk about body positivity, you're absolutely right, because, I remember watching Black Orpheus as a kid. That was my Cinderella movie, because my parents loved Black Orpheus, And when I talked to some Brazilians, they never even heard of it. So that must have been like a movie that was really popular in African-American communities in the 60s, in the 70s, because when I talked to other Afro-Brazilians, they're like, oh, I got to watch it. I've never heard of it. But I mean, I don't know. It's just, at least some of them I've talked to. So I don't know if there's any listeners who can confirm that, who are Brazilian, but that movie left an impression on me because I wanted Orpheus as a little girl.
You're hilarious.
I wanted to be, I was like, oh my God, look at him.
You're hilarious. I watched that movie when I became obsessed with Brazil via my crush.
Yes,
so I was like,
girl.
okay, I'm getting ready for Carnival. It's on.
It's on. I was like, I'm going to be in samba. And I learned how to samba here in New Orleans at Casa Samba, and I was like, oh no, I'm going, So I love Brazil, and I'm glad that you love Brazil. I love Paris too. Paris is a beautiful place. Paris is amazing. So I love that we have that in common,
Yes. In Sidebar, we went to a samba club in Rio, and I was just like, this is heaven on earth. It was so much fun because I took samba classes too. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm dancing the samba in Rio. This is amazing. And the joy that people, like the energy in that space, it was just a random Monday or Sunday night. You would have thought it was the biggest New Year's Eve party ever. People were so just like hype and just like happy and just dancing and enjoying themselves. And that energy, I was just like, I need more of this, and I'm coming back for it.
Was it last week? Because Pachi Duras was here for a week, and teaching and cooking, and this was her first time in the U.S. So it was really profound moment just to even just have these conversations with her. And it was so hard to find fresh juices in some places or fresh coconut that she wanted, because we have a lot of challenges as far as our food systems in New Orleans. We have a food capital, but the access to fresh food is very limited. But we had a dinner to honor her at Carmel Cafe, and it was so amazing. And Amigos de Samba performed. And so there's a nice Brazilian community here in New Orleans.
Nice.
So you can definitely tap into that energy. And the band Amigos de Samba, oh my God, they play often throughout the city, and you definitely feel the energy. And Bachi just was dancing samba all night long, and she loved it.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
But, were you inspired by anything in Brazil that you want to, maybe one day bake or something? I'm just curious, because guava is definitely one of my favorite fruits.
Yeah.
And they had coconut, that their access, to coconut and just those tropical flavors are just so inspiring, that carajé, it was amazing. And palm oil, I think we need more vendors to sell palm oil, because in some places, even in the South, it's hard to get palm oil. You have to order it online sometimes,
Right. Exactly. I'm not going to front. I really want to remake this cocktail I had, because it wasn't.
Yes, do it.
It wasn't a caipirinha. It was caipirinha-esque, but it was very different, because it had basically a different alcohol base. And had involved so many spices. That is something that has been on my mind a lot. And then like the moqueca and the shrimp bobo, which reminded me of gumbo. That was the other thing. I was like, this is really reminding me of the most delicious meals I've had in New Orleans. Like this is, I see the links of the diaspora.
Absolutely.
So I actually would like to go back. This trip inspired me to go back and focus on food, and just like take a cooking class, eat around more, like just, I think I was so obsessed with just the delicious meals we had and wanting to repeat them that I kind of wasn't in exploration mode, because I was like, I just want to eat this because it's delicious.
Yeah.
But I would like to go back and learn more and like get my hands in the food and, talk with chefs more, talk with home cooks. Like I definitely want to go back. I'm not kidding. Like when I am able to take the magazine off of hiatus, I really would love to do a Brazil issue, because I was like, oh, this is
girl, I want to go with you and introduce you to my friends. That would be amazing. That would
get
be
this
amazing.
funding. We're going to figure it out. Cause I was just like, that was it. I was like, oh yes, Brazil. There's so many stories. There's so much to be inspired by.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Klancy, so much for this.
My pleasure.
This was so much fun. I loved, this was a great conversation. I'm sure our listeners will enjoy it. And we're so proud of the work that you are doing. And you are such a light in this world. And I just want you to know that, because I want to make sure that you get your flowers, because what you have done is going to continue to be a frequency of love for many years to come. And the little Clancys in the future will read your book and be inspired by it. So I want to thank you for everything that you've done, and for even asking me to be a part of it. I was like, oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Zella. I see you as a light and such an inspiration and such a deep, deep expert on so much. So I value and honor the knowledge that you hold. So thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being part of the book and the magazine.
Thank you. And I hope that we see each other in Brazil.
Yes.
Thank you all for joining Culture and Flavor. It's been a pleasure just having this conversation with Klancy, and we look forward to our next episode. Y'all keep eating, keep living, keep enjoying life. Ciao. Culture and Flavor is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org.
Hey, it's Francis Lamb, host of The Splendid Table. Every week on our show, we talk about food and cooking and the meanings of food and cooking. We talk with the most interesting people in food about their techniques, their culture, and everything in between. Whether it's about how fried chicken took over the world or how Instagram changes the way people are actually eating. It's a food show where everyone is welcome. Come join us. You can listen to The Splendid Table wherever you get your podcasts.